Think Europe has to be expensive? Think again. These 7 cities are not only stunning, but also surprisingly affordable, so you can eat well, explore more, and still stick to a budget. Whether you're looking for medieval charm, coastal views, or buzzing nightlife, I've got you covered. Let's dive in. If you don't live in Europe, you probably hear a lot more about Warsaw than you do Krakow, but Krakow actually used to be Poland's capital a few centuries ago, and today it's far nicer, more interesting, and even a bit cheaper than Warsaw. The historic main square is one of Europe's most beautiful, and the well-preserved area is ringed by a gorgeous green park, so it feels much more serene than it does chaotic like so many other old town districts. It's even got a castle near the center of town, and nearby you can get a filling meal for around $6 or $7 compared to around $20 in London. Krakow has a large university in its heart, and that means there are also cheap restaurants, cheap local bars, and interesting nightlife. 2 of the most notable attractions in the area are a huge salt mine complex you can tour and the Auschwitz death camp, both of which are much more interesting than they might sound. Good hotels for 2 people start at around $40 per night, including all taxes, so you could probably afford a bit of a splurge here. By the way, you'll see backpacker index numbers for all of these cities to show typical daily costs for a budget traveler. In comparison, the backpacker index for London, Paris, and Amsterdam is around $125 per night. Next up is Budapest, Hungary, which is another stunning city that looks like it would be really expensive, but since it's deep into Eastern Europe, it's still weirdly cheap in the way that Prague used to be. The city straddles the Danube River with the hilly Buda side and its castle on the west bank, with the much larger and flatter Pest side and the famous Parliament building on the east bank. It's been a major capital city for centuries, and when you walk around it all feels very grand and very important. Good hotels here start at around $60 per night for 2 people, and food and drinks here are cheap as well, especially if you get a little away from the places with river views. One popular attraction in Budapest are the public thermal baths, the largest and most famous of which can be enjoyed for about $27 for the full day, including a locker. It's definitely something you won't see in the center of any other huge city. Another uniquely Budapest thing, and a personal favorite of mine, are its ruin bars. These are free-form entertainment and shopping spaces built into previously disused courtyards of apartment buildings. Drinks are cheap, the atmosphere is lively, and again, they are like nothing you'll find elsewhere. The most famous tourist city on the coast of Croatia is Dubrovnik, and it was famous even before it was used in the Game of Thrones TV series. It's gorgeous and fascinating, but it's also tiny and incredibly touristy even when cruise ships aren't in town. A bit up the coast, you can instead visit Split, Croatia, which has a similar white marble ancient city at its heart, but it's larger and is still a real coastal city where you can observe locals and eat and drink among them between seeing the amazing Roman Diocletian's palace, which was built in the 3rd century. Split is also cheaper, and I think it's more interesting. Both cities are UNESCO World Heritage Sites, and visiting both of them is worthwhile, but Split is the better value, and it's also a major transportation hub for Croatia, with the train terminus and fleets of ferries taking people out to nearby islands. Hotels in Split start at around $60 per night for 2 people, although it's a bit higher in summer because this whole area is popular with Northern Europeans taking sunshine holidays. Hotels in Dubrovnik start at around $100 per night, but that's still half of what you'd pay in Rome for a similar place. Croatia isn't as cheap as it used to be, although it's still cheaper than Italy, which is just across the Adriatic Sea, and it offers great value for visitors. I'd spend a day or 2 in Dubrovnik and a bit longer in Split. Before I go on, I'd like to mention that I'm Roger with priceoftravel.com, and I'd love it if you would download our free new ebook that shows prices and information about every major tourist city in the world, including Caribbean islands. Just sign up for our weekly travel deals email and download the book. You can use the QR code on the screen now or go to priceoftravel.com/ebook. Now back to the list. Even to those who still refer to it as Constantinople, Istanbul is one of the world's most important and historic cities, and fortunately for us, it's also surprisingly cheap. You can find fairly nice hotels in the prime tourist district starting at around $40 per night for 2 people these days. Geography nerds famously know that Istanbul straddles both Europe and Asia, and even though most of the famous sites are in the Europe part west of the Bosphorus, the city still feels very exotic to Westerners, for lack of a better word. Turkey is one of those rare countries like Argentina where price inflation is going crazy, but the currency is dropping at an even faster rate, so it remains oddly inexpensive these days. Your hotel will probably include the famous Turkish breakfast, and it'll likely be one of the best meals you'll have anywhere in Europe. The main sites here are also unforgettable, including the Hagia Sophia, the Blue Mosque right next door, and the famous and almost infamous Grand Bazaar shopping area. The trains in and near Turkey are still kind of slow, but you can get a cheap flight from almost anywhere in Europe and it'll be one of your favorite stops. Unlike the first 5 cities I mentioned, these last 2 are a bit remote, and in both cases that is actually a big part of their charm and the reason why they are so affordable. Sarajevo isn't actually far from Split or Dubrovnik, and it's famous for being the site of the event that triggered World War I, but there are 2 far better reasons to visit for most of us. Number 1 is that it's got a gorgeous setting in a valley surrounded by mountains and along a river, so it's very photogenic from almost every angle. The historic center at its heart has loads of lovely buildings and monuments, so it has kind of a storybook feeling to it. Sarajevo only has about 400,000 residents, so it's big enough to feel important, but not so big that it can feel overwhelming. The other unique thing about Sarajevo is its history of religious tolerance. The city famously had a Catholic church, Orthodox church, mosque, and a synagogue all in the same small neighborhood. Even today, Sarajevo is popular with Muslim visitors from the Middle East and Africa, as it's got a huge mosque in the old town and places you can get a really cheap pint of beer just a block or 2 away. It's a very unusual mix of influences based on its unique religious history, but it's also a beautiful city and a fun place to hang out. Hotels in the historic district and nearby start at around $50 per night for 2 people, including all taxes, and food and drinks are great bargains here as well. Last but not least, many people have never heard of Cesky Krumlov in Czechia, even though it's the country's second most popular destination after Prague. This is easily one of Europe's most beautiful small towns with a gorgeous castle overlooking the main square as a serpentine river frames the area. There are only about 13,000 residents, so this really is one of Europe's smallest proper tourist towns. The castle dates back almost 800 years, but the town itself is over 3,500 years old, and when you see the area, you'll understand why it's here. The reason it's not internationally famous yet is that the town was severely neglected during communism, so it wasn't very special until they started cleaning it back up again after the 1989 Velvet Revolution. Cesky Krumlov feels kind of like a secret destination that you can only unlock by spending enough time researching and planning your Europe trip. It's about 3 hours by train or bus from Prague, and the bus actually drops you off closer to the center. Hotels start at around $60 per night for 2 people, even in the small main square area, and you can get an excellent half-liter of local beer for about $2 each. Prices have crept up as Cesky Krumlov has been catching on with tourists, but it's still wonderfully cheap compared to places like Rome or Amsterdam. Thanks for watching all the way to the end, and please check out priceoftravel.com for hundreds of articles about cheap places and how much things cost around the world.